We dive into the state of the Ravens defensive line with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. And we're back here. It is a Tuesday, a Taco Tuesday at that. And here with me is the one and only Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown, our Tuesday guest. Spencer, great to have you back on the show. And we're going to be talking a lot of defensive line today, talking about some Sam Koch. How you doing today?
Doing quite well. OTAs around the corner. I guess we'll be kicking off here shortly. And it's officially, time to get into the swing of things a little bit of this next season, this new season. Many of the pieces are in place, all that good stuff. Orioles are having some fun. Preakness was plenty of fun, a fun time in Baltimore right now as the Ravens maybe have a little uncertainty. So it's a good time of the year. Summer is here and ready to talk some ball.
Oh, yeah. Adley Rutschman and his first hit, his electric weekend, I'd say, got the Preakness in there as well. It is a pretty cool time right now in Baltimore sports, and the Ravens with their OTAs. Obviously, it's a big time. We're getting closer and closer to the regular season. But Spencer, some of the big news of last week was obviously the retirement of Sam Koch, 16 years, such an amazing career, and so many memories for a punter, which I know some people just undervalue the punter position completely. But what Koch did for, one, the organization, and two, just the punting in general, absolutely just incredible. What are your favorite memories of Sam Koch, and what do you remember most about his Ravens career?
I remember the ways the Ravens worked around holding calls the most. I think that's what always stand out in my mind when I think back years from now. I think I'll just remember them having the wherewithal to hold to end games, do it in the Super Bowl, run out of the back of the end zone, do all kinds of crazy stuff. So those will be the things I remember, the fourth down conversion, some of those. And then, of course, just kind of his general impact. I mean, the way he kicked the ball, 22, 23, 24 different ways, whatever it was, the Cook ball, the screw ball, the lofty Lucy, all that stuff. So Koch had a really good run. I think he was definitely one of the top, 3-5 punters in football for probably about a decade, and definitely, started to fade out a little bit. I think he was getting a little old, but his holding was always immaculate no matter what. And because of that, he's been a major part of one of the greatest, kicking triple threats, trifectas, whatever it is in NFL history, if not the best. The Wolfe pack was so memorable. Him, Cox, Tucker, and those three being able to convert so many awesome field goals, so many awesome plays, and everything he could do in terms of, pinning guys deep, pinning teams deep for so long, as well as, being a little tricky on fourth down, always having a little bit of zest whenever needed, and a fun aspect of the Ravens for sure. So much love to Sam Koch as he sails off into retirement.
Yeah, in that Super Bowl play, Spencer, the one obviously Sam Koch, he drops back in the end zone, takes the safety. I mean, when you were watching it live, did you think that was going to be an option for them? I mean, what did you think they were going to do in that situation? And how impressed were you for Sam Koch? I mean, not just kind of taking 2 steps, running 3 seconds off the clock and running out of bounds. He stood there and waited and got pushed pretty hard out of bounds and kind of fell a little bit or tripped a little bit there. I mean, what was that play like when you were watching it there for Koch?
I was watching it at the Super Bowl. I was in New Orleans, and I remember saying to my brothers, they should hold the ball and take a safety and run out of the back of the end zone. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Look at the clock. They should hold the ball, run out of the back of the end zone." And they did it. My brothers were like, "Wow, how did what?" So it was funny for me because of that. My brothers always remember that. I always remember that. And it was fantastic. The way the Ravens always had that wherewithal, and he was always so calm about it, always did the right thing in those situations. As often as they've had him throw the ball and do some various different things, always very calm. There was never any panic in anything he did. And I think we see that in consistency. We also see that in his holding. Never any panic in his holding, never any panic in any of those strange situations they put him in. And it seems like he thrived in those situations.
Yeah, I was there in New Orleans too. And it was an incredible thing because just the way that he did it, the way that he pulled it off, it was to perfection, and it gave them a chance there. That final, punt drop kick for the safety kickoff, and you have him running down the field, and Josh Bynes making that tackle. I mean, it's stuff that I'll really never forget. But Spencer, Sam Koch is not just leaving. He's going to stay with the organization, become a special teams consultant, and I think that'll help Jordan Stout immensely. But how big is it that he's actually staying with this team? And I know that he's meant so much to them. How big is it?
Definitely is big. It's going to help continuity, help everything be that family aspect. And the Ravens like to, model themselves after the Steelers. And those are the two teams that always have succession plans in place and always move slowly and tend to have those sorts of deals in place to make sure everything is just a day in the park when you're transitioning from one GM to another, one coach to another, whatever it may be. So for Cook to be a part of that and be a part of a NFL team that has cared more about special teams, frankly, than any other team has, isn't surprising at all. And Stout seems like a guy that really gets it technically and has the passion for it and the obsession of the aspects of kicking off, the aspects of holding, doing all of those different kinds of things. So I think it'll be a smooth fit, and we'll continue to see the Ravens be a dominant force in special teams as they have been for so long.
And it almost feels like the punter class in 2022, you had obviously people were talking about punt god for the entirety of draft season, but I think Stout almost profiles a bit better to what Cook brings. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I definitely think it's more control based, more precision. But don't get it twisted. I mean, Stout can outkick Areza. Areza had some nice bounces and things, but Stout can absolutely launch the ball to the moon. I called that on the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. I was like, the Ravens draft a punter. It's going to be not punt god. It will be Stout. He is the number one punter in this draft. Apparently the Bucs were trying to go up and get him. And you see punt god end up being the third punter. So don't get it twisted. Stout has an absolute hose attached to his lower half there and hit a 50. You shared that video, hit a 57 yarder in college. And it's just a really well-rounded punter that, again, just isn't as flashy maybe as someone who, is punt god and he's jacked and does all that stuff. But I think he just gets it technically and in terms of taking it seriously in that sense of a professional. Not that punt god won't, but being a little bit more of that precision type guy.
Right. And Stout, he does, it's the power, it's the accuracy, it's the precision. He has a lot, and he takes his holding very seriously, it seems like, as well, which is obviously something you talked about with Sam Koch. And speaking of that, what are some of the things that Stout can learn from Koch? Obviously, Koch is the ultimate professional. He did so much over the course of his career. And now with Koch being with the team as a special teams consultant, I feel like Stout can learn quite a bit here and turn himself into a very, very good punter for, I think, a ton of years here.
Certainly. Has the pedigree. Again, takes it seriously. I think he's into it, has that little bit of sickness to him where that technical side of it, that precision side of it, the obsession with it will fit right in with a guy like Justin Tucker and having Sam Koch, who was a part of that for so long. And we saw the way they integrated Nick Moore into the practice squad and brought him up to replace Morgan Cox. And now we're going to see the same thing. So I think he's definitely going to be a long-term option for the Ravens. And I'd be willing to put some money on him lasting at least 8 years in Baltimore.
Oh, yeah, it seems pretty likely. I would take that bet with you. But Spencer, we talked about memories of Sam Koch, but what are your memories of the Wolfe pack? I mean, now Justin Tucker being the lone Wolf in Baltimore, the new big three there is Tucker, Stout, and Nick Moore. But what do you remember about that trio of Justin Tucker, Sam Koch, and Morgan Cox? Just the camaraderie they had, the friendship they had, and the moments they had on the field too.
Yeah, I think back to, Billy Cundiff having a fantastic Pro Bowl year, having a huge leg, and then falling short of expectations. And the Ravens have a rookie kicker out of Texas that had hit some pretty amazing game winners and had a lot of gusto come in, beat him out, and roll that from there. And it starts with, obviously whatever they did during the regular season, they had some nice moments, but into Denver in the freezing cold, in double overtime, hitting a game winner and hitting big kicks throughout the playoffs, not missing. Going into year 2, year 3, year 4, all the way up through, really remembering that Lions game where it was just them. It was just those three. They scored all the points. They won the game. Those guys have definitely always had that camaraderie and a fun little element and been presented to the fans that way. And I think they've been enjoyable. A lot of people have admiration for them. And Tucker being kind of the head personality there with Cox and Cook there to rein him back in has always been a fun little trio in Baltimore.
Yeah, something I'll remember for a super long time. And having Cook and Cox gone, you have Stout and Moore coming in. It's going to be really interesting to see how those guys work well together. But Moore, I think, had a really good year last year, and I think Stout has all the potential in the world. And you know what you're getting in Tucker, so it'll be just fine there. But Sam Koch having an amazing 16-year career, and again, just a huge congratulations to him for what he was able to do. But we'll head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. We'll be diving in to the Ravens defensive line, talking about their veterans next. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Rock Auto. And this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it can be pretty impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. And there can sometimes be pretty pointless or even simply intimidating questioning. You have to wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts in their computer. And you can really only choose what they have in their warehouse because that's all they have. And now you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Rock Auto is a family business, so they've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are really super, super low and reliably low at that. You can explore their easy-to-use website today. Find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See other parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On. They had you hear about us back, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allshacker still here with Spencer Schultz. And thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On Sports today. But Spencer, the Ravens have a ton of depth at the defensive line position. And I think going into the offseason, people anticipated that there might be a bit of reshaping done there yet. Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams as free agents. There was some uncertainty surrounding Derek Wolfe. Now, the veterans on the roster at this moment, you have Calais Campbell, you have Michael Pierce, who was brought in or brought back from Minnesota. Pierce spending the first couple years of his career in Baltimore. You have Derek Wolfe, and you also have newly signed Brent Urban. The team made that official yesterday. So I just want to roll down those veterans with you, Spencer, talking about what your expectations are, what they bring to this team. Let's start with Campbell. I mean, a player who came over from Jacksonville a couple seasons ago in a trade. Really great interior pass rusher over the course of his career, although it hasn't necessarily been there in Baltimore. He obviously had a great run in Jacksonville with the sack numbers. It hasn't really translated over to Baltimore, but a player who's a leader on and off the field, someone who you can't really get away without double teaming a lot of the time. He's just so big and massive. What do you see Campbell's role being this year, and what does he still bring, even though he's entering a very, very, I'd say, the end stages of his career?
At his kind of position, although he is extremely versatile, he's still one of the best run defenders in the NFL. He still commands double teams. He still beats double teams. He still has prodigious length, plays with it, gets off the ball, and is able to be a consistent force, especially against zone concepts. Consistently just beats guys in the run game over and over again. He is overwhelming. We haven't seen that decline in any way, shape, or form. And Mike McDonald's defense, supposedly, according to maybe some people smarter than myself and some other rumblings and things we've seen, Ravens aren't going to be running as many stunts as Wink did. And Wink was very, very, very stunt heavy. I think we saw a defense where they wanted to get a free rusher more so than get one-on-ones. And I think we're going to see a defense that somewhat at least transitions into wanting more one-on-one matchups. And that's going to benefit Campbell. 5.5 sacks over the last 2 years, someone who, sacks are very inconsistent. Pressure is a little bit more consistent as we see over time. But still knocking on the door of that 100. He's still, 6.5 sacks away. And of course, wants to hit that mark. That is the ultimate for a pass rusher. That is the penultimate prestigious blue ribbon on, hoping to maybe be a Hall of Famer and get in eventually. I don't know that Campbell would be a first ballot guy, but I don't think it's ridiculous to think he had a Hall of Fame type career. So he definitely needs to hit that threshold. I think he wants that. And I think we see him, push pretty darn close for that, if not get it this year. I have to think that's a major, major, major goal. A lot of that has to do with health. But again, getting those opportunities, maybe getting some more one-on-ones will help him very much so in that category. The other veterans, Pierce. A guy that has had some troubles, was, not in shape for camp at times in Baltimore, misses the COVID year, misses some time last year with Minnesota, but one of the better nose guards and nose tackles in the NFL. Has been a little bit more mobile than a guy like Brandon Williams, a little bit more kind of tackle radius and length and things, a little more pass rushing prowess. So he is the spear of a too high defense, trying to be that point that you really work through in run fits from the nose through the inside backers through the safeties. And I think we're going to see a little bit more split safety looks as well in McDonald's defense. So very good run defender still. He's someone who wins quick. He has a lot of quick wins. He has a lot of clean wins. he is relatively consistent. Again, just one of the better nose tackles in football. Can give you 20, 30 pressures, 3, 4 sacks, and be a consistent force against the run. The other guys, Urban and Wolfe, we'll see who ends up healthy, who ends up on the roster, who ends up here in September, whatever it may be. But those guys are a little bit, similar, playing that kind of 3-tech, 5-tech tweener, kind of more powerful against the run. I think Wolfe maybe a little bit more polished, is a more polished pass rusher, a little more twitched up in that regard for sure. But Urban, if Wolfe ends up being cut or Wolfe ends up unable to go, he had back surgery, all these things, then is a nice guy to have there as well. And it's hard to think after what they watched transpire last year all across their entire roster that they're not just trying to really, really, really achieve concrete depth to make sure they feel a little bit more bulletproof in ways. So between Urban and Wolfe, they're one of those guys I think will be on the roster and probably playing, 7 to 10 games and be in the rotation and be a sturdy run defender.
Right. And I want to go back to Pierce a little bit, Spencer. Do you feel like that is a pure one-to-one replacement with Brandon Williams in terms of position? I know Pierce offers a bit more at this stage, it feels like, than Williams would if he was re-signed, and it feels like that ship has sailed. But do you feel like that is a pure one-to-one positionally? Because I know when they played together, the Ravens tried to play him at the same time, and it wasn't really working out. So do you feel like now with Williams seemingly out, Pierce coming in, that's a pure one-to-one?
Yeah, it's right around there. I could get into the intricacies of, what Williams did, maybe a little bit more sturdy run defender, what Pierce brings a little bit more upside in the pass rush, but ultimately, pretty close. I know that Williams is really, really, really highly regarded above what kind of the fan perception is in the NFL inner circles of people that really enjoy kind of that trench play. So it's more or less a 1-for-1.
Right. And he's a player, Pierce is, that I agree. The pass rushing upside is there. The Ravens have struggled to generate interior pass rush for the past couple of seasons now consistently. And I feel like with guys like Campbell, hopefully getting them more one-on-ones, as you talked about with Pierce in there as well, you could have some sneaky pressures in there. I feel like that'll help them a ton. But Spencer, what's your feeling on Derek Wolfe right now? How are you feeling about him? Because he did have the surgery. He posted the picture on social media. We haven't seen him for a year. And in 2020, he was one of the best run defenders in the NFL. He's been very highly regarded as a player who helps his teammates get sacks. Von Miller said that about him, where Derek Wolfe would eat up blockers and Von Miller would kind of stun around and go in and kind of get the sacks there. So what's your feeling on Derek Wolfe in terms of his place on this team, what he still can bring after a year off, and those types of things?
If he walks in, he's committed, wants to do it, he's in good shape, then he's going to play. Think he's, better than a Brent Urban, is more nuanced as a rusher, is a better run defender overall. I think they're, more or less similar, and there's not a huge drop off there ultimately, but Wolfe is a better player, and Wolfe, like you said, is a really high level run defender and does open things up a lot for other guys. So if he comes in, he's healthy, he's in shape, he wants to play, he'll play. So I think the Ravens are kind of in the wait and see position there. Little bit more to it perhaps than that, but at the end of the day, if he wants to be there and is an active participant and eager, then I think if he's a volunteer, I think the Ravens will have him right on back. And if he's more of, a prisoner, then they'll probably set him free and let him go elsewhere.
It is a situation to monitor. It's one where there is a bit of uncertainty, it feels like. And Wolfe, a really, really great player. And he showed his value in 2020. And he showed it over the course of his career, too. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like having him on this roster would be an asset on the football field. So we'll see what happens there. But Spencer, the Ravens have gone pretty full reunion tour here during 2022 free agency. They tried to sign Zadarius Smith, didn't work out, unfortunately. They have Michael Pierce back. Brent Urban now, the defensive lineman, spent his first 4 years in Baltimore. I think a solid signing overall, not necessarily a needle mover, but someone who can provide very solid veteran depth. I mean, what does he bring, and what do you remember from his time in Baltimore when he was first with the team?
Remember him being a little bit of a rotational player, a little bit of a factor. Like you mentioned, special teams, able to do some things, and definitely brought a lot of energy. As I know his wife's local and did a lot of fun things. So just kind of, maybe not the most spectacular player, but someone who can get into a rotation and make some hay for themselves, be a sturdy run defender, do all those things. Plays with outstanding length, and likes to celebrate when he gets in the backfield in a fun way.
Yeah, it should be fun to have Brent Urban back in Baltimore for sure. But Spencer, when looking at what the Ravens had veteran depth wise in 2021 compared to what they have at this moment right here in 2022, are you more confident that they can withstand injuries and have more quality depth than they did last season with their veterans?
Definitely. Last year was historically, an outlier. So for them to get hit with that 2 years in a row would be insane. But at the same time, I think it's imperative to temper expectations of players that are coming off of injuries and are rehabbing and aren't in peak physical condition and are more likely to get re-injured and might need to take a little longer than is expected. It is not Madden. They don't just turn the season over, come back with the same rating, and you stick them back in the lineup. There is more to it. They are real human beings going through insane injuries and advanced surgeries that were not possible 10, 20 years ago. So a lot of wear and tear on their bodies. So I think definitely try to temper expectations and try to wait and see until late August, early September, where the cards kind of lie. So I think the Ravens do have a very deep defensive front. They have a really deep defensive line, and they have made sure to kind of fill all sorts of body types between length, between nose tackle bodies, a lot of 3-tech types, guys that can play 4 inside, 4-eye, and a little bit of 5 as well. So I think they're super, super, super balanced and deep. And I think this, on paper, is probably the best Ravens defensive line quite some time, probably going back to maybe like 2014.
Yeah, they certainly have the pieces. And I just thought of something here, Spencer. The Ravens, obviously, they like to move guys around. So kind of branching out a little bit and talking about some of their outside pieces. Are there any guys who you feel like could move inside and play a significant role if they needed to? Is that a Jalen Ferguson for you? Or is there anybody who you feel like on this roster could move inside and play a pretty good amount of snaps there?
Not really, to be honest. I don't think so. Some guys will probably get in there. Ferguson, sure, they could stick him inside a little bit, but they haven't done that, so I'm not sure why they would now. I don't really think so. I think they're kind of going a different direction. I think they like speed on the edges a little bit more so. And I think the Ojabo pick continues to trend in that direction. They really want guys on the outside that can contain the pocket and can go run and chase more athletic quarterbacks as the game has changed and you're playing more mobile quarterbacks, quote unquote mobile, than you were 10 years ago. You're playing more mobile quarterbacks or guys that can threaten you with their legs than you're playing guys that can't. So I don't know that there's a ton of those guys. OA will play inside. They like to move him in a little bit. That was Wink, but could definitely see a similar role doing some contain, doing some spy type stuff as well. Here and there, but I don't think there's anyone that's going to be taking significant snaps inside from another position.
Right. And I think they have the depth, obviously, barring injury, to not necessarily have to do that. I know the team like to use Pernell McPhee in there a tiny bit and kind of do some stuff with that and move him around because he was more of a big bodied type player. But I agree. The speed is real on the outside, and the Ravens with their interior guys, they have the beef up there. They have tall guys. I mean, Calais Campbell, 6'8", Brent Urban, 6'7", just huge, massive human beings. So I think the Ravens veteran depth, I'm very confident in it. And I think that they are in a good position and a lot better of a position than they were in 2021 in that aspect. But still a ton to talk about here. We're going to dive into the Ravens' young guys on the defensive line coming up next. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about. But first, I want to tell you a bit about Built Bar. And there's a lot to love about brownies for sure, including brownie batter. And sometimes people can eat half the batter just making the brownies. But imagine if you could lick the brownie spatula and get your protein in. Well, you're in luck because Built has a new creation, and this one is better than ever in the brownie batter puff. This puff takes protein bars to a whole new level, and they're available right now on built.com with 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 7 grams of sugar. Brownie batter puffs are the perfect pick-me-up for any day, and they're really, really good. The brownie batter puffs will have you completely forgetting they're eating a protein bar. There's no need to pinch yourself because this is real life. Go to built.com, get brownie batter puffs now before they run out. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. We're back here with our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Spencer Schultz. Again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Make your second listen Locked On NFL, as there's a ton of great content over on that channel. But Spencer, the Ravens, we talked about their veterans on the defensive line in the second segment. Diving now into the young guys. I mean, Travis Jones is a player that people are very excited about as a rookie. And I feel like he's going to have a big role, and we'll talk about him in a few minutes. But I want to start with Justin Madubuike, someone who I think has a ton of potential, a ton of unreached potential at this point. His second season, I had him as the big breakout pick for me during the 2021 season. Had some flashes, didn't really have that big breakout season. Do you feel like this is the year for him to just absolutely put on a show and really put the league on notice?
I think it's going to look different than maybe we expect. I don't think he's going to be a big sack guy. I think he kind of, for lack of a better word, I think he's a really good player, and I think he already is really good. I think he's already here. I think that all of those things that we expected are just going to be a little bit different in the box score than we anticipate. He is an explosive run defender with great hand positioning and is a really unique, difficult matchup with his combination of length, strength, and mobility, flexibility, all of the things he can do. He has given Wyatt Teller, who is an all-pro guard on the Browns, one of the top guards in football, nightmares, has repetitively taken advantage of him, put him in the backfield, forced him to hold, dented his gap in, done some really, really crazy things. We see the hustle. We see him run plays down. He is so athletic, uber athletic, like an edge defender. So he does all of those things. Again, I do think he is a really strong run defender. He's not a guy that can take on double teams really well at this point. So maybe that's where we see some better traction. But it's still kind of hard to double team him when there is a Michael Pierce and a Calais Campbell as well. So, and maybe a Derek Wolfe. So it's difficult. But at the same time, in terms of rushing the passer, he doesn't show the kind of natural ability to feel where the quarterback is. When he wins, it's more of a, I'm going to beat my blocker and really beat them thoroughly. But a lot of times he over pursues. A lot of times he, wins the block, but isn't winning to where the quarterback is. So I think that's where he still kind of lacks the ability to translate pressure into sacks at a really high rate. So I think he's not going to be a really big sack guy. I thought maybe last year, 6-7 sacks, maybe you see him take a jump. Hey, maybe he does that this year. I think he's fine without it. But again, putting him in a defense where maybe it's a little bit less stunting, a little more one-on-ones, some more opportunities that way. We would see him take a jump, be a 5, 6, 7 sack guy. But I already think he's a really good player. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the entire NFL, to be honest, especially in terms of young, developing, kind of unheralded defensive linemen. And I think he's has a little more versatility than he's been given an opportunity to show. I'd love to see him get a lot of snaps on third down or true passing situations as a one tech or zero tech. Would love to see that. So that goes in hand with a guy like Travis Jones. So I think those guys will take a lot of snaps there. But I already think Justin Madubuike is a really impressive player. Consistency as a pass rusher is, again, he's winning his block. He's doing a nice job, but kind of over pursues or just isn't really the smoothest transitioning to where the quarterback is. So I like what he's doing. He will continue to get better. I don't know if he'll ever be that big time all pro sack guy that I think he does have the potential to be, but he's really good. I'm excited to see what he does. And I think he's primed for a nice year.
Yeah, I'm remembering a couple plays where he'll beat his guy and then he'll still be working upfield after, and then the quarterback will be rolling out, or he'll take a step, and it's a thing about knowing where the quarterback is. So I think he's still a very impressive player, and it does go far beyond the box score with a lot of these guys. It's something where you have to kind of look at the nuances of the game, what he's doing, how he's impacting the game. Like, talking about Derek Wolfe, the sacks that he helps his teammates get don't go in the box score for him, but it helps out the team and it makes him a better player overall. So I think Madubuike is a player that I'm very excited about to see just what he is in terms of a sack number guy, but also what he's already brought to the table, I think is very, very impressive as well. But Spencer, talking about Travis Jones now, a player who, again, I did not expect available anywhere near 76, which is where the Ravens ended up getting him in the third round, a player who I think will have a role early on. How big do you think that role will be, though?
You said Travis Jones?
Yeah.
Yeah, Travis Jones, I think will have a pretty sizable role early on. It'll probably look like what Justin Madubuike's 2020 looked like a little bit, but he should be playing a little bit more nose. So he is going to be a guy that can take on double teams, is able to anchor, is a lot bigger, stouter, and functionally stronger in some ways. So I think we do see him a little bit more of a force. Him and Pierce probably going to rotate through a good bit. I think they're going to want to lean on Pierce a bit. And I think we could see Travis Jones take on, 15, 20, 25, 30 snaps about midway through the year, through the end of the season, maybe seeing that it's in certain situations and depending on injuries, turn into, consistently maybe 30 snaps. he is a nice run defender, but he's a much more explosive pass rusher. He has C4 in his hands. His club is legit. He will knock grown men to the ground with his hands. He is violent. He is so strong with his upper body. Can really do some damage between the numbers, between the hashes a little bit. So I do think we end up seeing him be like a 30%, 40% player as a rookie, which is really significant in a really deep veteran front. So I'm excited for Travis Jones and think he's got all the potential in the world to be a real NFL player.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited about him too. And speaking of Travis Jones and what he brings, Spencer, do you feel like he will be more of a player who gets eased in to that role, or is he going to be right away coming out playing 30-40% of snaps early on?
I think he's pretty ready. He played 50, 60 snaps at times at Connecticut, didn't really come off the field much. And I know that the Ravens kind of spoke about wanting to efficiently use him and keep him fresh. But if he's going to be the guy rotating at nose, then I think 10 snaps minimum to start, because Michael Pierce isn't going to play 65, 70, 75% of snaps. Very few nose tackles do. Michael Pierce is a big boy, and you want someone to keep fresh in there. So I think we'll see him first, second down, a couple third downs early on, 10, 15, maybe 20 snaps week one. So we'll maybe call it 15, depending on how many kind of total. If there's an offense they play against week one in their opening matchup that ends up staying on the field a lot, then I think we'll see Travis Jones. But yeah, I think he is ready to take some decent snaps early on.
Yeah, I think so too. He's a player that I'm really excited to see on the field. But Spencer, last but finally not least, we have Brochik Washington, a player who I think has improved a ton. He showed some flashes coming out of Texas A&M, and a player that obviously you look at the depth of the roster and you think, where does he fit in? But I think that he's earned himself some snaps, depending on whether it be injuries or whatnot. But I think he can step in the event of an injury, play a pretty big role. But what's his role for you on this team when everybody's fully healthy?
Yeah, Washington is a guy that can really be lined up anywhere. 5-tech inside. So being able to be a little bit outside shoulder or head up on a 4-tech all the way down into kind of 2-eye. So I think Washington, if he does what he did last camp and does what he did last offseason, aside from some, a little bit of off-field drama he had early on, I think he's a lock. I think he's going to make this team be a rotational guy, make plays against the run. I'm not sure he'll see a ton of pass rushing opportunities, but I think they like him on early downs, and was a guy that came out of Texas Tech and was able to make hay in a 3-3-5 front, was used to taking on some double teams and things, had some improvements to make there, but really solid hand placement. I think he paces himself well against different run concepts, and doesn't take himself out of too many plays while he is still learning. So I think Washington's a player that will be in the rotation.
Yeah, the Ravens have so much depth, both veterans and young guys, where I'm excited to see just what each of them brings and how the roster shapes out. Spencer, how many defensive linemen do you think this team keeps at the end of the day?
Probably 6, but I could certainly see 7 if they want to go a little bit deeper in that category, if they're going to use more defensive linemen this season in McDonald's defense. So we'll see what McDonald, and I think a lot of people make a lot of sweeping judgments or sweeping statements, kind of referendums based on McDonald's 1 year in college with an Aiden Hutchinson and a David Ojabo. So his vision for the Ravens might not align with what we saw him put on the field at Michigan last year. So I'm a little hesitant to make any kind of sweeping things. Just want to kind of wait and see, but think at least 6, and think there's a possibility for 7 if they stay healthy. I think you can see some real value there, and maybe they don't end up keeping a ton of inside linebackers this year as things stand. So it would be interesting to see how it plays out, and we ultimately will.
Yeah, a ton of talent all across the board on the defensive line, and I think they are very well positioned to handle injury and just to get a ton out of their talent overall. But Spencer, that's all I have you today. Thank you so much. What do you have coming up on the docket this week? Because again, we're just continuing chugging along through the offseason here.
Yeah, just continuing to go back, rewatch some games. The Ravens have that 30 for 30 coming out, so the Baltimore Beatdown podcast will be visiting some of those games, visiting some of those players. We have a couple interviews coming out with some guys that were on the team and worked for the Ravens as well on that 2000-2001 run, and continuing to work back through last season and try and imagine what maybe Mike McDonald's defense will look like with that in mind, and maybe looking at what a Rashad Bateman can do, things of that nature. But for now, it's a little bit of the quiet time, but at the same time, always engaging in conversations on Twitter, always trying to post some content on BaltimoreBeatdown.com.
Awesome. Yeah. And be sure to check out his work, follow him on Twitter, check out his podcast and his written work. It'll all be in the description below. So Spencer, thank you so much again for hopping on here. But that's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for listening. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens content and answering your mailbag questions. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you tomorrow.